Welcome my dudes, this is Cause Legend Coyote speaking, and welcome to part 8 of 9 videos showing you the differences between the Sega Genesis versus the Sega Master System of a game called The Simpsons Bart versus the Space Mutants. The reason why I'm comparing these two consoles together is because the Master System is pretty much the clone of the Genesis, so if you're interested in seeing the major differences between the NES versus Sega Master System, go watch NES versus Sega Genesis for more detailed info. This video will point out the slight changes between the Genesis versus Master System, so hope you enjoy. Starting off with the beginning screen, Flying Edge versus Sega. Obviously the Sega Master System releasing after the NES of EU 1991, not really sure what month exactly, but considering that it was released after the NES and it's pretty much the competitive version of the NES for the Master System, is the graphics look quite nice when it comes to colors and graphics alone. It looks quite fantastic. The reason why I'm comparing these two together again is just they pretty much are the same game, even though I should technically be comparing it with the NES. Like, it's just the same game, as you can tell. There's really no point for me to have compared Master System with NES. As you can tell, Master System has no cutscene, so it just skips all of that. So the mutants are slightly different. Instead of the entire body turning green with a mutant head, it's just the mutant head. The X-ray itself is orange instead of green. In order to scroll through items, you need to press down on the D-pad. In order to use items, like the X-ray, you need to press down and the use button. So it's got the use and the jump button. So you have to press the use button. Down and use. Master System needs to grab all of the goals, so I'm gonna have to be slowing down the Sega Genesis to be able to sync each other up. Obviously right there in the beginning with the mutants it's slightly different, and the timer starts always at 600 instead of 999, so keep an eye out on that. The timer does reset after each death, unlike the Genesis, although the most interesting part here is the fact that the Master System has no pause button, so even though you can scroll through items, you cannot pause the game at all. Obviously different mutants, and I'll be talking about the rest of the slight changes as we go by, but yeah, the reason why I'm not comparing it versus the NES is because pretty much it's the same thing as the Genesis, so technically speaking, the Genesis is a clone of the Master System and not the other way around, but because of the way I did it, that's how I said it. And as you can tell, Mo actually despawns the mutants, this is the first version that does that after so long. I'm not sure if what's it called? The Game Gear, there you go. I'm not sure if the Game Gear has it or not, but thus far it's the one that despawns the mutants. In order to scroll through items, you need to press down on the D-pad, so instead of just giving you the 2 items that you can buy, you need to scroll through them, which is, I find, pretty weird. So the other interesting thing about what I find about this is the fact that even though the Master System is pretty much the same time as the NES, obviously just by telling, the Master System just has so much more colors, so much more graphics improved from the NES, which I find super interesting. I can see why the Master System was a direct competitive versus the NES. But as we go on, you'll see why I rather much prefer the NES over the Master System. So when it comes to physics, the physics feel awesome. So Bart is not slippery, slidey like he is for the NES at all. You have really great control of Bart. So there, if you pay attention to the mutant, his head changes, which is pretty neat. Moving on forward with the UI, I think the UI is really disgusting. It's just, it does not look nice. Not really sure why they decided to not put borders around their UI, but, you know, there's that. The other cool thing is here with the skateboard. You can instantly stop on the skateboard, so instead of the skateboard slowly slowing down and then stopping, the skateboard actually just instantly stops after a little bit of sliding, which I find fantastic. So if you pay attention to the kid, he actually never turns around, which is kind of funny. So yeah, this game, you need to pick up every goal, which is a little bit disappointing. Not really sure how they messed up with the Genesis, but not with the Master System, but yeah. So moving on forward, right here with the Quickie Mart, you can actually get the 1-up from the Quickie Mart, but no sound tests. So thus far, none of these games have had any Easter eggs, like when it comes to the random letters that you can spawn or sound tests, which I find quite interesting. Not really sure why they passed out on those, but moving on forward, there's no mutants right here in the beginning of the retirement home, even though there aren't any in the Sega Genesis. Again, I have no idea why they ended up removing those entirely. Couldn't possibly have told me it was because the console couldn't handle it, which would be pretty damn funny if that were the case. So right there, the retirement key does in fact take you to the exact same place. Instead of at Moe's Tavern, it takes you right on the right side of Moe's Tavern. And right here, Grandpa's location is in a different spot. So there in the Genesis, he is in the top window, and here in the Master System, he is in the bottom window. And the coins that he throws is really slow, so you can actually end up picking up every single coin. And as you can tell, the checkpoints are weird. Sometimes the Master System adds more checkpoints, and then sometimes it adds less checkpoints. I have no clue why. Obviously, the location of Maggie is in a totally different spot. There you can see, I can actually move during the boss finishing cut down thing, which is pretty awesome. Moving on to the mall. So here we have the extremely colorful, really ugly mall. I'm just not a fan of how much color they added to this mall. Not really sure why they decided to go with a funky ass like 70s mall looking thing, but hey. Moving forward, if you actually end up paying attention to some of the enemies, they actually end up being the same thing as it is with the NES. Not really sure, again, why they ended up deciding to change up a bit the enemy locations of the Sega Genesis, but, you know, it's always something interesting to see, I guess. Moving on forward, there just is not much to talk about when it comes to these versions, because there's not that much that's changed. It's very little information that actually ends up changing that. It's still fun to play. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't, there's just not much to talk about, unfortunately. So because we have to pick up all of the goals, I need to run around and farm. So pay attention to that escalator. Oof! That thing is huge! Instead of just cutting it, they're like, you know what, we're just going to improve the entire thing and stretch it out. So here you can obviously go into the secret hat location, which is awesome. You just press down and the use button and you'll enter. So it's the first trash can on the second floor. Ballerina, and jumping shoes. Check coins. These boots right here, they're different looking from the Sega Genesis. Not only that, but they actually end up stunning you. So if you try jumping when the boots drop, they just won't let you. And trying to pick up some of the hats that are up in the air is actually really difficult. So again, not really sure why they ended up putting hats in locations that you can't really pick up. So look at that escalator. Oof, that thing stretches the entire way through. Moving on to the third floor. So enemy locations here are slightly different as well. Except there's just no point for me to actually point them out. Wow, there's just not much to say right now. So there is the Jebediah head. Pick up the Jebediah head, you move forward, so there's only one ring instead of two. No one up in the trash can, so I'm just moving on from that section. So obviously at this point I've already picked up all of the hats, so I just move forward. So pay attention to that escalator one more time. Oof! That thing takes the entire right side screen, which is hilarious. Fighting off the boss. Boy, isn't this exciting. At least Bart isn't in like the middle of the forest kind of thing like they were going with in the Sega Genesis. That's definitely something I was really picky on when I was playing that one. It's like, what? It's like, why is there buildings covered in grass for? Moving on to the circus. So if you pay attention to the mini-games that you can play, you can actually see them in the Master System versus the Genesis, that some of them are just completely blacked out until you actually want to play them. And the balloon minigame does not count towards gold, so you know, play as much as you want, you're not gonna go anywhere. So you're actually forced to end up farming at the end. So here, when you play this minigame, you actually can't move from the spot where you're at versus the Genesis, where you can move forward and just skip everything. And if you want to have Lisa, you actually need to farm her right there in the beginning, otherwise you'll have to go back. So coming up here, as you can pay attention, the bird actually ends up coming back. I think this is the very first game where there is actually a bird enemy that you can get hurt with. And also, if you pay attention here, instead of getting a Jebediah head, you actually get a 1-up. So that's interesting. And yeah, this is the first time where the bird comes back, which I find extremely cool, considering the fact that in the NES one, the bird only shows up when you go up the ladder, and in this one, the bird is always shooting out of the sky. So there you get your 9 balloons after winning. Move on forward. Coins still shoot out of the pipes. So entering into Krusty's mouth, as soon as I get there, when you exit Krusty's mouth, you actually end up spawning right on top of Krusty's mouth again, unlike the Genesis where they spawn you over on the right side. That's super interesting. Also, when it comes to checkpoints, the only checkpoint that this game, that Master System has, is right next to the death-defying section, and obviously after each transition, versus the Sega Genesis that actually ends up having a little bit more checkpoints here in the circus. So this is me having to farm the balloons because the game just does not offer enough balloons while actually playing the entirety of the level, which is kind of funny, even after picking up the 9 balloons that you get from the Dizzy Door minigame. Also, if you pay attention to Bart holding the slingshot, you'll see that he'll actually end up holding it the entire game when he doesn't have a different weapon that he can use, basically. So finally entering the museum. The museum actually, Master System ends up having far more checkpoints than it needs. So here, as you can tell, I'm still holding on to that slingshot, but as soon as I pick up the gun will replace the slingshot, but as soon as the gun is done, it'll replace it with the slingshot again. Not that you can use the slingshot, it's just a graphical error, which I found pretty cool. So, moving on forward. There's the gators. They look a little bit longer in the Master System versus Genesis as well. Still 3 though, so technically it's still the same thing. Monkey needs to die. Boosh. Gotta fight. Fight the plant now. You actually end up need to hitting the mini bosses 1 extra time versus the NES, that you just need to hit them at 3, which I found pretty hilarious. So if you pay attention to that little section right there, the 1-up is actually inside of the glass case versus the Genesis and basically every other version of the game besides the NES, where in that glass case right before these 2 giant gap little sections where the 1-up is actually located in the casket, which I found extremely interesting. And then right here, the hands also come back versus the Genesis. It's It's kind of funny how they actually ended up drawing an actual hand versus like a dragon hand. And there, as you pay attention to where Bart's standing, the ground actually extends a little bit further than what you can see, which I found pretty hilarious. So here, the ants or spiders, I don't know what the hell these things are. They can actually go both directions, left and right. And also, if you pay attention, the totem in the middle is already out. So what you're supposed to do is collect the ankhs, collect one ankh, press the totem, collect another ankh, press another totem, because if you collect, let's say, 5 ankhs, you'll only push the totem by 1. So you need to collect an ankh and then press the totem. I have no idea why they ended up doing that. Also, you need to pick up 8 instead of 7, and I'm pretty sure the NES it's 6, so that's super interesting. Also, when you're done with this little section, no dust comes from the sky, so yeah, a lot of minor changes. Coming up to the mummy boss, you actually need to hit the mummy boss again 4 times versus 3. Not really sure why they ended up deciding making it so you have to hit them one more time more, but again, I guess this is what Sega did in order to combat Nintendo. I have no idea. So moving on forward, there isn't really much going on again. Just trying to collect those Homer token things. Oh, don't need that. Don't need that, Bart. Just keep running. So again, no volcano. It's just, you know, they're out in the forest somewhere. No fossil section, even though there's a bunch of bones in the ground. So there you see me just wasting the gun, and then as soon as the gun runs out, boom, you have the slingshot again. I just find that extremely hilarious how the slingshot graphical error is there. So here with the Dino Balls, as you can see, you can actually climb down the Dino Balls and back up the Dino Balls, and you won't fall down like you would in every other version. Not only that, but you have to hit the Dino Balls 4 times on the nose and not on its head, and it spits out a 1-up, which I found extremely interesting how this is the only version where you actually end up winning something for killing the Dino Balls. And here we are on the museum boss, moving forward to the final nuclear plant. The one and only final level of the second to last game. So there's the map for Marge / Maggie location / code doors. Right there, you actually end up starting on the far left door instead of in the middle of the elevator. Whenever you die, some of the sections where you can die will actually end up spawning you in different spots. So instead of spawning you like in the last door that you came out of, sometimes it'll spawn you, it'll spawn you on the left side. So basically it'll warp you from one section of the level over to the left side of the level. So basically, if you enter through the elevator and you couldn't actually go all the way far left, you end up dying, you actually end up spawning on the far left door, which is kind of funny. So if you were to play this game, you would have to find out which deaths would actually be beneficial when it comes to speedrunning, if that's something that you're into. So moving forward, there again you can pick up the 1-up in Explore 4, which is nice. So in case if you were running out of lives, you can actually pick up all 3 of them in this game, which is awesome. You still have to pick up 4 power rods and then go down and collect, hand them in. But because of where Marge is located, anytime she shows up, she'll end up picking up the power rods that you have instantly with no cutscene, which is also very awesome. So the Master System actually ends up having a minor soft lock. I'll end up pointing that out as soon as it happens. But, you know, for now, there isn't really much to say, so I'm just gonna BS my way through this rest of the game. So again, I just find the Master System super interesting, considering the fact that it was a direct competitive versus the NES. Now, I don't know anything about the Master System. I grew up with the NES, so I know the NES was released like at 85 or so. And considering the fact that this says EU of 1991, I want to say it was at least a couple years before Bart Versus was released for the Master System, while the NES already had its version out. I have no idea. I hope you correct me though. I've just been looking up at so much information thus far that I did not bother checking. So it's just neat to look at what the NES version could have looked like if it was a little bit more powerful, I guess you can say. Again, I am just not a fan of the UI whatsoever. No pause buttons, so that's just extremely odd. And on top of that, you know, the physics for this game is extremely awesome. Nothing that I can actually end up breaking the game, unfortunately, so you still have to pick up all the power rods, not all the power rods, all the goals in general, and just makes playing the game just playing the game. Like, there isn't really anything special about it. Like, for instance, in the NES, there are some speed texts that you can use in order to skip a few seconds of gameplay by just using the physics alone. But because this one is more of a just go forward and jump, and there isn't really anything special about it, it's not very fun to play. Casually, it's amazing, obviously, but there again you can see the graphical glitch that it just sticks Bart with the slingshot, which I just find extremely interesting. So, again, I'm just BSing my way through this game thus far. The death is not supposed to take me to the door, but it just takes me across the stupid electric door, which I find pretty hilarious. Yeah, we got one more version left, which is the Sega Game Gear. I'm actually going to end up comparing the Sega Game Gear with the Sega Master System, because the Game Gear actually resembles the Master System a lot more. There, if you pay attention, there's a mutant stuck on the elevator. You can't see where your elevator dot is, and the reason why I'm doing what I'm currently doing is because I need to hand the power rods in. So when I noticed that the mutant was just stuck on the elevator, that was just a little bit weird for me. But yeah, I'll be comparing the Game Gear version with the Master System because it resembles the Master System a lot more. Obviously, with its own differences, not that many, but we'll both find out what those differences are once I actually get there, because I'd rather not spoil anything for now. And the Game Gear is the final one of the 9 videos, which is amazing. Once I finish the Game Gear, I'll be mentioning it in that video as well. I'll be releasing one more final bonus 10th video, just explaining what the personal ranking is with a little bit more detail, assuming I don't end up just talking like a dumbass and saying the same thing over and over again. I'll just be explaining why it's at the position where it's currently at, you know, what actually is interesting slash the same, or, you know, it's just boring all, just actually ported over from one to the other, I guess you can say. But again, when it comes to the Master System, when it comes to the personal ranking, they don't actually end up being any different from the other. Like, for instance, I think in this case, the Sega Genesis is above the Master System, but it's not like the Genesis and the Master System I like more one over the other. It's just the fact that one is more interesting than the other, but it's not really that much more different, or like lower ranking, I guess you can say. I don't know, I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say, but when it comes to the personal ranking in general, they don't really vary all that much, even though I have a personal ranking. So here, finally, Maggie does not activate the final cutscene. She gives you the final power rod, and you have to go and hand it in, which I just find so stupid. Glad they changed that for the Genesis. So if you pay attention, this Genesis had the entire family in the elevator when you have the final cutscene, but here it's just Bart, and let's see what kind of final cutscene we have. There you can actually see that you can move around in the elevator, which is kind of hilarious. There you have a bunch of little baby Barts for some reason. It says, Jane, stop this crazy thing. And that's it. So here is the kill screen. Also has little baby Barts just laughing in your face. And I forgot to show you the kill screen when I was comparing to the NES. So there you can see the differences between both of the versions and the NES one alone. There is the personal ranking with the Master System above the MS-DOS for great reasons. And with that, I'll be releasing the Game Gear version sometime next week. I hope you guys have been enjoying. I forgot to point out the soft lock, but the soft lock is in a floor 3, all the way to the far right. There's a hole that you can fall into where there's no alien, and you can actually end up soft locking in there because there's nothing there to kill you. But other than that, hope you guys have been having fun. Hope to release the next one again next week sometime, and hope you guys have been enjoying. With that, nothing much more to say, so I'm gonna head out and hope to see you in the next one. Peace out.